Looking out on how to refurbish wooden window frames like a pro? With just a few tools and a bit of effort, you can do it yourself here at MechMinds Hub. Let's dive in! To begin the refurbishing, check first if your window frames need a refinish or not. A refinish is necessary when the paint or the stain is chipping, peeling, or fading, or when the wood is cracked, discolored, or damaged. If your window frames are in good shape, you can skip this step and just clean and polish them. But if window frames look like these, then you definitely need to refinish them. To get rid of the old finish, you have two options. Remove the old paint from your window frames by a chemical paint stripper, or a heat gun and a paint shaver. The heat gun is more efficient and safer without involving any harmful substances. But you've got to be careful with it. The heat gun can mess up the wood or even burn your skin if not cautious. Definitely got to suit up with gloves, goggles, and a mask for protection. Plus, you need to keep it away from anything flammable to steer clear of any fire hazards at home. To use the heat gun and the paint shaver, crank up the heat gun to a high temperature and hold it about an inch away from the wood. Don't get too close or you'll scorch the wood. You will see the paint start to bubble and pop. It's kind of satisfying, isn't it? Then, use the paint shaver to scrape off the paint while it's still hot and soft. The paint shaver has a blade that slices through the paint and a guard that shields the wood from the blade. Tweak the depth of the blade according to the thickness of the paint and glide the paint shaver along the wood grain to avoid hurting the wood. Keep doing this until you get rid of all the paint from the window frame. Use a smaller scraper or a chisel to reach the corners and the edges. Be careful not to break the glass or the putty that holds it in place. If you do, you will need to replace them later. And that would be a hassle, right? Once you have removed all the paint, sand the wood to smooth it and remove any remaining bits of paint. Use an orbital sander or a palm sander for this step, depending on the size and shape of your window frame. Start with a coarse grit sandpaper, such as 40 grit, and then switch to a finer grit sandpaper, such as 120 grit, and then 240 grit. The finer the grit, the smoother the finish. Sand the wood evenly and thoroughly until it feels smooth and looks consistent. Sand the edges and the corners by hand using a sanding block or a piece of sandpaper. Don't forget those tricky spots. They can make or break your project. Before you apply the new finish, make sure the wood is clean and ready. First, get rid of any dust and dirt by wiping the wood with a damp cloth. Then, let it dry completely. Next, look for any cracks, holes, or gaps in the wood. If you find any, use some wood filler to fill them up, and then sand them until they are smooth. After that, check the putty and the glazier tacks that hold the glass in place. Are they loose, cracked, or missing? If they are, replace them with new ones. Here's how to do it. Use a putty knife to scrape off the old putty, and then put new putty around the glass. Press it down with your fingers so it sticks well. Then put new glazier tacks along the edge of the glass every few inches. Cover them with putty so they don't show. Now that the window frame are prepped and ready, it's time to give it a final touch, either to paint or stain. First off, paint offers a whole spectrum of colors to play with, which is pretty cool. Plus, it provides excellent protection for the wood, shielding it from the elements and wear and tear. However, the flip side is that it does tend to hide the natural charm of the wood under all those layers. On the other hand, stain really lets the wood's character shine through. You will admire the beautiful grain and hues, which can give a more rustic or classic look depending on your preference. But here's the catch. Stain requires a bit more careful and upkeep to maintain its luster and protection. Ultimately, it boils down to your personal taste and the vibe you're aiming for with your window frame. Just remember, whichever route you choose for a product specifically designed for windows, and ensure it matches the type of wood you're working with. Don't skimp on using a quality brush to ensure that finish goes on nice and smooth, giving your window frame that polished, professional look. Now, it's time to put the paint or the stain on your window frame. Read the directions on the product label as it tells you how to use it properly. Usually, you have to stir the product well before you use it, so it doesn't have any lumps or bubbles. Then, apply it in thin and even coats going along the wood grain. Don't put too much or too little, just enough to cover the wood. Then, wait for each coat to dry completely before you put the next one. This might take some time, depending on the weather and the product. While waiting, sand lightly between coats to make the finish smooth and flawless. Make sure you apply the product to all sides and edges of the window frame, not just the front. This will make the finish look nice and last longer. The final step in refinishing your window frame is to apply a top coat of varnish, lacquer, or polyurethane, depending on the product you use and the type of wood you have. This is a very important step because it will seal and protect the finish from moisture, sunlight, and other environmental factors. You want your window frames to look shiny and new, right? Well, this will do the trick. It will make your window frame glossier and more durable, and it will prevent it from fading, cracking, or peeling over time. The last and most important step in refinishing your window frame is to apply the final coat of varnish, lacquer, or polyurethane, depending on the product you use and the effect you want to achieve. This will seal and protect the finish from dirt, dust, and scratches, and it give it a glossy and professional look. Just like before, read and follow the directions on the product label carefully and apply it in thin and even coats, using a brush or a spray gun going along the wood grain. This will ensure a smooth and uniform coverage and avoid any drips or bubbles. And don't forget to sand lightly between coats, using a fine grit sandpaper to make the finish smooth and perfect. This will remove any imperfections or rough spots and create a better adhesion for the next coat. You may need to apply 2 or 3 coats depending on the product and the desired effect. The more coats you apply, the more durable and shiny the finish will be. Wait for each coat to dry completely before applying the next one, which may take several hours or even days, depending on the weather and humidity. It will make your window frame look amazing and last longer. Did you learn something how to refurbish wooden window frames? If you found this video helpful, let us know in the comments below. Remember to hit the like button, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell for the latest updates. Thank you for watching.